You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. I'm Bill McIntyre here with John Gallo, bringing you news stories about Long Island and about Long Islanders. We are lucky today to have with us Joie Tyrrell, who is the education reporter for Newsday and has been very busy as of late. Quite a few stories about, and always a big issue for Long Island. Education, the many facets from, people complaining about what they're paying for school taxes and then all the issues that come along, and especially with COVID. And so I'm sure you have quite a few things to let us know about what's going on now.
Of course. And Joey, definitely we wanted to start our discussion with an update about your recent reporting in Newsday, finding that Long Island schools apparently have the highest COVID-19 related expenses in the state. And we know there was a story you wrote a little bit in the past about it, and I think we got some more figures in a study about $105 million or so had been spent. So can you give us an update on where we stand for our listeners?
Sure. Those are two different surveys that were conducted. The first one was done by the New York State Association of School Business Officials and the New York State School Boards Association. And that looked at the regional picture and divided the state into several regions. It's really not surprising that Long Island spent the most, because if you look regionally, Long Island usually spends the most on per pupil spending. Sometimes Westchester runs equal or a little bit more in certain areas, but a lot of the times the costs of education on Long Island are often higher than any other region in the state. And that survey had a response, from a mix of districts across the state. The second survey was conducted by the Long Island Education Coalition, which is made up of more local educators, PTA leaders, business officials, superintendents, more of a local Long Island mix of people in the field of education. And that found that got a response from about half of the 124 school districts. And that found that school districts have budgeted and spent about $105.5 million. And the author of that study, Julie Lutz from Eastern Suffolk BOCES, said, that's reporting from half. So we could be looking at nearly double that cost. And that's for the whole year.
Okay. And obviously, we've had this discussion with county executive, with other Newsday reporters and other local officials. We all know how important it is to keep everyone safe, but particularly students and faculty in school settings. So we understand that, and we know how much the cost is. But can you maybe get into how the cost is specifically broken down a little bit?
Well, sure. In the state survey, some of the bigger costs were technology, PPE. And in the local survey, one of the biggest costs was staffing. And if you look at the local survey results, and again, it's only from half, so this is a lower number than what reality is. There have been more than 5,000 hires, and that includes teachers, teachers' aides, custodians, mental health professionals, transportation officials, substitutes, things like that. Because if you think about how the classrooms are set up now, you have a smaller number of children in the classrooms, so you have to spread your staff out in a different kind of way. So that you'll have one teacher with 12 students or 6 to 12 students, and then another teacher with 6 to 12 students. And then if you think about the technology piece, which was also a very big cost factor, some school districts didn't have Chromebooks or computers for all of their children. Like they might have supplied grades 5 and up with what they call a one-to-one initiative, where everybody gets a Chromebook. But the remote learning became so important in such a quick time that they just turned around and bought things like iPads for a whole kindergarten so that they could follow along. And then another cost on top of that was that since there is a mix of remote and hybrid in technology, you had to have cameras put in the classroom so for the children at home can participate and see what's going on in the classroom. But for Long Island, staffing was the biggest expense with over 5,000 new hires.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like I said, I know there's been discussion. I know you had written in the past specifically about the maybe issue with getting substitute teachers being, kind of the need, but maybe not, I guess, that the need being met. Is that still the case? And, how did they play into this situation in terms of having to meet those staffing needs?
I haven't heard as many extreme incidents of a need of substitute teachers, because I think what some of the school districts did, and which is kind of what happened also with the medical staff, is they turned to the universities, and they are using student teachers. They're using there was a change in the state law that allowed them to use people who are not certified as like emergency substitute teachers. But I really feel that there's been partnerships with the universities, and particularly Stony Brook has been able to supply a lot of student teachers who are serving as subs. And for them, they love it because it gives them experience in the classroom. Yeah. And for the administrators and the officials, it fills a role. So I think that is one of the way those needs are being met. One thing that's really troubling to a lot of the administrators and officials and superintendents is how to pay for all of this.
Of course.
And that's become a very big issue with both authors of both surveys said that is there's concern about that.
Yeah, there was an interesting. John and I were speaking before the show about. I know a case where a teacher was out, and I believe they were concerned about her contact with COVID, so they asked her to stay home. She actually, because that school was already set up to do remote learning, she taught the class from home.
Right. There have been cases where some teachers have been teaching from home, but and this is part where the substitutes come in, is one of the superintendents told me, yes, you have the teacher at home, but you still have to have somebody in the classroom with the kids. They need to have a supervisor. So therefore you have to have double the staff.
Right. See, in her case, they have quite a few student aides in the class. It's a handicapped class. Okay. So the teacher was at more of an advantage. She already had 3 or 4 people in the classroom.
Right.
But I said that's interesting that you turned it around rather than, it just being for students at home. Here's a teacher who had to stay home, and she taught her class remotely. It'd be nice if we could use that for everybody, but like you just said, it's not. Yeah.
And there's other concerns. The tech divide, we talk about a lot, not just for students having access to technology, but also getting maybe faculty and staff kind of caught up to speed with having to do remote teaching, as opposed to maybe in the university setting where even there it's not always a constant, but it's a little bit more of a common kind of practice. Maybe just back to the other point that you were mentioning before, obviously in terms of funding, how is, again, the funding broken down? How much of it do we know is coming from state versus county versus federal?
Well, we don't. We really don't. I don't think some is coming from the county. I'm not real clear on that. But as far, it's kind of the superintendents and administrators and business officials are kind of keeping their eyes on Washington right now.
Of course, everyone.
So the stimulus package. There was one a couple of weeks ago proposed by a bipartisan group of senators that had called for, I think it was more than $160 billion for states and local governments. And now I think that's been cut from the current negotiations that are going on right now. And there was hope that money would flow through the state and then flow to the school districts. However, there have also been discussions of separate funding streams from the federal government for school-related costs and expenses. One of the issues that has come up is the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. They don't consider some of these expenses or costs being incurred under an emergency. It's not an emergency. So I think it's the Middle Country School District, which has spent about $5 million, I think, so far. About 232,000 of their costs are covered by FEMA. So everybody's watching what's going on in Washington. I did read that there has been discussion of expanding what FEMA can cover, but I believe everything's in negotiations right now.
That makes sense. Yeah.
How does COVID testing affect what schools are paying out the cost?
Well, that's another concern. School districts are looking to how are they going to be reimbursed, because when school districts, some of them fall into one of these zones, they have to test, I believe, up to 20% of the population. And that's another question, is they have to do it, but how are they going to pay for it? And there's a lot of questions, like you had to have extra buses, you had to have plexiglass dividers, you had to have masks, you had to have PPE, you have to have extra cleaners in order for school to work. And the one positive that I hear from parents and from superintendents is that it is working. When there are outbreaks, it's usually outside of the school. For example, there was a school district out east that had an outbreak, and they tied it to a Sweet 16 party. So the outbreaks are occurring outside of the school, but the infection rate in the schools is very, very low. One school district yesterday, I think Massapequa, put out a note to its community that while the infection rate was over 6%, I believe, in the community, in the 3 schools in their yellow zone, it was under 1%. So it seems that even though they've spent an incredible amount of money, it's working. And research has shown, and mental health experts, and this one professor I talked to at Hofstra said, children do so much better mentally, socially, and emotionally and academically when they are in school. So they have been given the chance to be in school.
Yeah, no,
at a cost, but they're in school.
Of course, but like you said, the value, is invaluable. It can't be.
I think the kids. The kids deserve a lot of credit. They deserve a lot more credit than we're giving them, really. Yeah. Because schools become the kind of like the filter. That's how we find out that there was, a party in the neighborhood or 9 other people. It's the schools that are giving us that information. Right. Whereas initially, I felt it too. I said, oh boy, they're going to send everybody back to school. It seems to me as though somebody wants herd immunity, as though there wasn't a choice. It wasn't like it was going to turn out good, but it did. And they're doing incredibly.
We were talking last week with your colleague, Robert Brodsky, and, we were definitely echoing the point that, how much it can't be, again, overstated, what students, how they stepped up to the challenges, and maybe the fact that in the environment, kids, especially at maybe the lower education levels and, grade school, where they're more willing to comply with the authority figures and follow the protocols, and they're used to having a very structured day. So, especially because some of them, they're so young that this is just what they kind of had to be acculturated with, that it makes sense that, the rates of infection in students, thankfully, has been relatively low from inside the building. Sometimes even, higher infection rates from faculty and staff, from being, just in the community more kind of freely. So it's a little bit ironic that way. But like you said, it's good to see that the money, although is higher than other, areas and count of the state, that it seems to be, again, having a positive effect. Would you say that that's what the reporting shows, that extra money is spent, for lack of a better term, is not for naught? It's having the desired effect proportionally? I think
it seems to be working. I mean, like I said, if you look at the rates in the schools, the children are doing okay. And one other thing I've noticed is that schools, a lot of districts took a cautious approach. And so in the beginning of the school year, they would do like 2 or 3 days back in, and then they started to add days, particularly at the younger grades, because they saw how much the younger grades craved social interaction, craved personal connection with their teachers. Yeah. So it's it does seem to be working.
Okay, yeah, like I said, and in comparison to the state, the infection rates in the schools, I imagine, are not higher than other than the average, we'll say.
No, they're not.
Exactly.
Actually, I think one of the things that we were talking about was there were licenses that the Nassau County Department of Health had to okay schools in Nassau County and maybe Suffolk County. I was pretty sure it was just Nassau, that they weren't allowed to test. They had to do it under a license. And that the county health department had not issued that license. We were just curious if you knew anything about that.
No, that's not an area that I've really looked into. I know that whenever the school districts have a positive case, they have to work in conjunction with the Suffolk and the Nassau County Health Departments, but I don't really know about the licensing issue.
Yeah, we weren't sure. Because of course, politics got in there a little bit. So I think it was maybe more about that. But it was something apparently that all of the other or most of the other school districts in the state, it was a non-issue.
Right. It was like a formality. Right.
Yeah,
like
something like that. And the Nassau County Health Department just didn't do it or something. So we were wondering if that jacked up the prices of COVID tests that were done in the interim.
Oh, I haven't really, I haven't heard much about that from the school districts that I've spoken to, but it does sound like something that would be worth looking into.
I'm curious, and this may, maybe you do or don't, with the change in administrations, we're hoping that the Secretary of Education gets to turn over too. And maybe, a lot of people feel like we could get somebody that really would serve more people's interests. Right. I don't know if there's anybody slated yet to take over that spot.
No, there hasn't. They haven't named a new Secretary of Education, but the Biden administration seems to be naming cabinet members every day. I read in the Washington Post yesterday that there were two contenders that have been named, and they were both educators. They both have a background in education. They were both former teachers. I think one is the top education official in Connecticut, and I can't remember who the other is, but there have been discussions, and in the educators that I've talked to and some of the parents that I've talked to, they're thrilled that Dr. Jill Biden will have a voice in the White House because they feel that they really haven't had that in the past, 4 years of regarding, things like testing and education reform. So they're hopeful that the change there will be positive for them.
Yeah, right. In my experience, there is a lady that in New York. I don't know if you're familiar with Diane Ravitch. Yes.
Yep.
And I heard her speak at Queens College at a commencement address, probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And, I thought, now there's somebody who's got their finger on the pulse of education.
Right.
It was night and day compared to what I heard from the administration and then what you hear from somebody like Diane Ravitch. Right. So I keep pushing her name to get the administration to, I don't know, when I mention her name to people.
In the Clinton administration, didn't she? I believe so maybe she's, I'm not sure, but that would be, I had heard some people mention Betty Rosa, who is, Chancellor of the Board of Regents right now. So, but I haven't seen anything other than just wishful thinking.
Yeah.
A lot of that this time of year.
Yeah.
And anything may be better than what
I know that it seems like every advocacy group and every school leader really has their eye on Washington because, of course, federal funding is always important for schools, but for this pandemic, it is to them even more essential because they've had to lay out these costs in order to have kids safely in the classroom and continue to learn. And there are concerns about things such as a COVID slide. They don't want the children to fall back. There's been research that shows that that's been happening, especially in some of the poorer communities. But I have to say, what I have seen is that from March to June, when the schools shut down immediately and there was just such a shift to everybody went remote, a huge improvement what happened in the fall, a huge improvement. Everybody got Chromebooks. They set up, there were donations of Wi-Fi hotspots. It was an amazing, if you take a step back and think about public education, things always move at a glacial pace. I mean, I remember even one time just changing the lunch menu to like a whole wheat flour, and there were hearings and should we have birthday cakes and the whole thing. And this turned on a dime from June to September, a whole different delivery of education, a whole different delivery of teaching. And it really is, I think it's a testament to parents, to teachers, to educators that they pulled this off.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
Yeah, being able to adapt.
How much it's changed.
But I also think that the pressures, the reason to me that it was pulled off is because if they didn't pull it off, they would become useless.
Right.
Well, I mean, this was saving education in general. Right. It wasn't just because if they had to send those kids home and there was no way to connect with them at home, we got nothing. We got nothing. The technology was a big one. One of the things that I was not thrilled with was how many teachers and students that they sent home without the capability to use that technology.
Right.
There were fumbles and foibles, when they tried to get everybody to log on, and then, your microphone is off. And I mean, there should have been, although nobody could really foresee that that's what it was going to turn into. No. Everybody was left to their own devices. And amazingly, I mean, I can see some of these teachers are, they're in their 60s. When was the last time they, can you send me an email and a message at the same time? And can you do, but they did it.
Well, that's another cost. Another cost was that they did professional development over the summer and training over the summer. And that is, and hiring tech support people. There you go. You have to spend money for this work. I have to say, speaking personally, I have a 13-year-old, who is way more technology savvy than I am.
And thank God they were home at the time.
Right? Fix it right up.
Yeah. I think that was...
The kids, that's the thing. The kids were so ready that, this is how they communicate. They talk with, they've been doing like what we're doing. They've been doing for years.
Oh, yeah. FaceTime. And
new to me. I had never done a group chat before, 2020. I mean,
right.
Exactly. But like I said, and I think it gets them more prepared for what they will encounter in college, most likely anyway, that more independent kind of learning. But like you said, you need the support system there. You need the technology. You need the access to the resources. And, it's tough to, we've talked about in the past, those secondary kind of ancillary services that maybe you can't get the same quality, like guidance counselors, like, kind of mental health support, whatever it may be. That definitely is an issue. Maybe just to circle back to, I guess, maybe one of the last questions to close out this topic and then move to some other issues. Can you, I guess I'm curious in terms of the actual procurement of these different services, whether it be the laptops, whether it be, like you said, the training. How was that determined? Was that determined county-wide? Was that determined by individual schools?
No, that was determined district by district.
That's what I had thought. So, okay. But was there was a general guideline from the state that they followed? There was general guidelines
from the state. Like, I could give you an example. Like, a lot of, when this first started, when they were first talking about coming back, they kept saying, we're going to get plexiglass dividers, for the kids. But state education department, those are flammable, so you're not allowed to have them in a school. So you had to get a polycarbonate, which were all kind of these little details that school districts had to deal with on a very quick basis.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like an example, but it was a district by district decision. And it kind of seems like they just, one of the districts in my stories, they have temperature screeners when you walk through. Like, it's kind of like a metal detector, but not, when you walk through, and it's a temperature screener. And so they paid for these things and they just laid it out. And now I guess they're waiting to see what happens next.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
That's kind of hard though for them, to just be thrown into that situation, and you've got to zig and zag and
spend the money wisely, and know that the resources are going to a company that can deliver on the contract and meet the needs of that individual school population. It's definitely, like you said, been an immense challenge, and it's good to see that for the most part, school districts are able to rise to the task, and with the support again from the county and from the state, that they seem to have been able to keep our students safe throughout this crazy time. Another COVID-related story that I know you reported on earlier in the year that I was curious about was the role of schools in terms of providing free meals and adjusting even to having to offer takeout services and eating in classroom protocols. Can you talk about that a little bit more? And again, how that cost is also borne out and everything else?
A rule change from the USDA through the federal government, and I believe it was back in March when when we first went all remote, and that provided funding for every school district across the country to be able to provide free breakfast and lunch to students, whether they were remote or in person. And it was supposed to be a temporary rule for like 6 months, and then it kept getting extended, and now it applies to the entire school year. And that's through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And what that does is it allows school districts to provide a breakfast and a lunch to every student. And the delivery and the type of food varies from district to district as to what they're capable of serving. For example, a lot of districts for breakfast is a grab and go. So there'll be a cart or a table, and there'll be bagels and cream cheese, a muffin. They all have to meet nutritional standards, and the students will grab it and then eat at their desks. Now, another school district, I believe there's one in Valley Stream that I talked to, was able to purchase a hot cart for lunchtime, so they can serve the students hot meals, with insulated bags, and they wheel it down the hall, and the students eat at their desks. But in the elementary level, a lot of the students are eating at their desks. The secondary level, they've reconfigured cafeterias, put desks in there, spaced them out. So that's that kind of helps parents, because it's one less thing they have to worry about is packing a lunch for their kids. And also in a lot of the districts where a number of the students are on free and reduced lunch, it provided, which is a state program, it provided a nutritious meal for those children. And then the districts were also tasked with, they had to provide, I don't want to say takeout because it sounds but they had to provide a meal that parents could pick up. And districts, again, did it in different ways. Some of them did it like at the beginning of the week, they'll go and pick up a box that has five meals, 5 lunches, 5 breakfasts,
Okay, and that would clarify. That would be just for the student, the quantity. That wouldn't be for the family.
No, it's just for the student, but it's for breakfast and lunch.
Of course. Okay, so that's interesting. And I know another thing that I know I've dealt with in my occupation as a constituent services person is the PEBT program. And seeing that in New York City, because all the students inherently in the school system were eligible for the reduced meals program, that they were all and New York City school parents were all eligible and received PEBT benefits. What was the case, do you know, in Nassau County with those benefits, again, that were given to families for additional kind of supplemental grocery cost coverages?
That's more of like a county social services issue, which I'm not really that familiar with. I only specialize in what the schools have been offering. I do know that there have been some schools that have had food pantries put into their buildings, and they distribute food that way. But I don't think that that's happening now because they don't want outsiders or visitors coming to the building.
Okay, and that was the last follow-up. I understand, obviously, like you said, that being more of a human resources, social services kind of inquiry. But in terms of that, the city also offered a program where free meals were offered to members of the general public, sometimes because senior centers were closed, other places were closed, and they still have the school cafeterias operating, and it was kind of meeting some of those needs. Was that something that happened in Nassau County?
Yeah, I believe that happened in Glen Cove, in the Glen Cove School District, that they did distribute meals to families as well, and they wanted to when students returned, but they didn't want visitors coming to the building, so they partnered with, I think, the big church there, St. Rocco. I think they partnered with the church there. So the community, I think it's more of a donation program. It's not through the feds or the state. So the community, that food bank has moved to the church instead of the school. But the schools had had been issuing some resources to families who need food. Like I said, I heard of that in Glen Cove.
Okay, but more individually by, the municipality.
More district by district. Yep.
Okay, interesting. So, all right, thank you again, because we obviously know, how important food insecurity has been throughout this time. We had recently on the director of Lyland Cares, and we spoke at length about, what the challenges are that need to be met. And we know that schools, sometimes you don't realize, again, how much importance there is in meeting the nutritional needs of the students there, during any time. But all right, to segue maybe to some of the last final points and stories that we wanted to touch base with you on. We know that you and your colleague, I believe, Rachel Blidner, had recently wrote a story about school bus stop arm safety cameras coming to Suffolk County. So we were interested about that. And also, I guess, in terms of COVID cost, how much do they impact new initiatives and programs like this from happening? Because it's good to see this is still happening regardless. So if you want to speak about that and maybe more generally and specifically.
Well, what I've heard from the business officials in the school districts is that they are keeping their COVID costs separate. They have a separate budget item. They have separate budgets because I think that their thinking is that they are going to be reimbursed for these COVID costs.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
They are able to save money and use some of, when you talk about programs, they have been able to shift money around. For example, one of the superintendents was telling me, we didn't have to pay for supervising sports in the spring or transporting teams or things like that. So there have been some savings that they have applied to some of the COVID costs and some of the programs and things like that. Another story I'm writing that's coming out in the next few days or so looks at how schools are doing like after school programs and before school programs. And again, some of them are partnering with universities. What I'm writing about is the Baldwin School District is partnering with Malloy College and is having student teachers kind of tutor kids after school online who sign up for a program to have more academic and more social enrichment. So they are kind of finding ways to kind of do these things at a lower cost or shifting funds to pay for some things.
That's good to hear. And then can you just tell us again more specifically about the scope of, again, that announcement and that program that's going to come into effect in Suffolk County for the safety, cameras?
Oh, for the bus
Yep.
bars?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, let's see. I wrote that a few weeks ago, so let me see if I can remember. In COVID time, that's like a year ago.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, constant time warp, of course. What day is it? But all right. But generally, again,
the idea is that there's been a terrible issue with cars passing school buses, and it's a very big safety concern. And there've been a number of people, who get ticketed. But you have to have law enforcement there, seeing the
in progress
pass a stopped armed school bus. And so the idea, and I believe the installation is underway right now, is that the arm will go out, and on the arm is a camera, and it's not the only camera. There's I believe a number of cameras that are on the bus, and it records the license plate, kind of like Easy Pass or a red light camera of somebody who passes it. And there's video as well. And then that video and that photo is captured. And then the company that runs the stop arm camera program is working with law enforcement, and they send a ticket to that person. And I can't remember off the top of me, but I think it's a pretty hefty ticket. I think it's like $150 for the first offense.
Yeah.
But it's not points on your license.
That's what the next immediate question was. Because I know obviously with like the speed zone cameras being a more common thing, and with measures to try to keep students safe, I was interested in whether or not it would have points, but I guess that's what you're saying, it doesn't.
Yeah. And their hope is that it will impact behavior, kind of like when somebody knows there's a red light camera coming up, they don't make the right on red that they shouldn't, and
slow down
through it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully the idea is like, every bus or the majority of buses, because I believe Suffolk's is the largest rollout in the country.
Oh, interesting.
Right now. So you really don't want to pass one because you'll get that ticket in the mail.
Yeah.
It's an interesting happening though, because people's perception is that the county put the cameras out and that the police department or the judicial branch are going to be the ones overriding that. But we now have a company.
Right.
And the company is sending you the ticket. I think that's really interesting.
That it works. Yep. They've done it in other cities as well.
Yeah, I think that always kind of bothered me. I just never, because now we have that, again, we got that corporate oversight there with, capitalism and the business involved in, people screamed about being able to face your accuser. Well, when your camera's the accuser, there's nobody to talk to. Right. It's right there on film. It's a strange thing. And I know there have been some issues with camera companies and municipalities.
Privacy concerns, obviously, and
a lot of things.
The concerns
do you remember back in Nassau County when they did the tickets when you passed a school after school hours? Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah.
God, yeah.
That generated such a huge controversy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, what's interesting for me is I live on a corner that has a stop sign. And it's always like I'm always doing these little evaluations just because personally, I don't think anybody in Nassau County actually stops at a stop sign. We all think we do. We all think that super slow is stopped. And stopped is a whole different thing. And I sit and watch the cars come through, and I can tell you 1 out of 100 might actually. And the only time people actually do stop is when there's either a pedestrian or they think another car is coming that would say they would have to. Other than that.
This is a real safety issue because you have children involved. So
liabilities near school property.
I know a few bus matrons. I'm surprised it took this long. I really am. This should have been done years ago to be able to, especially because, we always say it's for the children. Really? Well, when the rubber came to meet the road, you didn't give the money for the cameras. So
but it's good to see that now that seems to be changing and that Suffolk County is part of rolling out, like you said, this pilot program. And hopefully it has some success. And, obviously people have, points of concern where, it's the idea of also raising revenue. But like I said, it definitely is a good purpose. We definitely want to keep our students safe, the parents, everyone out there, as pedestrians and drivers.
It's a weird situation, though, because if the camera program works, what it will effectively do is change behavior. So then people will stop driving around buses. But then it's not going to deliver the money that is the reason we got it in the first place in most cases. It's not because we're worried about the kids. It's because we need this funding to, so.
Well, we'll see.
It's an interesting.
Exactly. I hear you. Always, grounds to be potentially cynical, but at the same time, like Joey said, that we'll see what happens, and we'll hope that if the revenue decreases because less kids are getting hurt, then that's a good thing for everyone.
Well, it is a good thing, right? There's
of course,
no doubt about that. Right.
So again, we want to thank you for your time, Joey. Obviously here today, and just the last thing, maybe you could just kind of leave us a remark about was a story that you wrote because we've been talking about recently the end of snow days with the storm that happened. But, of course, that's a whole nother conversation. No, exactly. So what we were interested was the reporting that you did earlier in the year about schools actually agreeing, universities, to end spring break. So could you just talk about that decision, I guess, being finalized just briefly?
Sure. My dog is...
No worries.
Working at home.
2020.
Go ahead.
Good boy.
Anyway, she brought me the ball.
That's
trying to tell you to get it.
What that means.
Part of the, so there was a number of universities and then the SUNY system followed through after the universities, but universities like Hofstra University and some others, they decided to eliminate the spring break. And some of them took different approaches that they'll sprinkle days off within the spring semester so students get a break. But what they did is they did not want college students go to having a week off and either going home and being around a lot of people or going skiing or to Florida or wherever and then coming back. Yeah. And so it was a way to really limit travel. And I think in Hofstra's case that they also eliminated any 3-day weekends.
Wow.
So they didn't have a month, so if you had your day off, it was going to be a Tuesday. And then I think it was one of the other schools, SUNY Westbury, but it might have changed by now is that they were going to use it as like a study week. So you had to check in, but you wouldn't really come to class.
Oh, okay.
Nobody goes to class. I mean, you wouldn't
Exactly.
have assignments. It would be more of like a study catch up if you missed something, and you.
I see.
Professors and guidance would be available for counseling and targeted support. But the whole idea behind the whole canceling spring break was so that there would not be travel among students. Snow days is a different. I think it was just because I don't know why, but it was a district by district decision. Some districts it did say we're going to keep the traditional snow day. It's nice to have a normal break, to go and play in it. And some said, no, we're going to keep it as an instruction day because there is a state rule that you have to have 180 days of instruction.
Yep.
And so it used to be if they would build days into the calendar, like at the end of May, and if you didn't use your snow days, you got the day off in May. So, but now everything has changed, I guess.
Well, that was another question I had as far as state aid and things like that. Because I remember in school, we got to take attendance, and it's got to. And then we come to find out that later on that they would use the highest day of the month as the average for the whole month.
Oh.
We didn't know that. So why don't you just tell us which day you need us to be there, and we'll all come that one day.
Well, in college, but it's a little bit more on the nose. I know sometimes professors give you that fair warning.
You got 3, and that was it. Yeah. But I'm curious, does a school get as much state aid for remote learning as they do if the students show up at the building? Is it the same?
I think it's the same. Because every district gave the families the option for their children to go fully remote. This is a year like no other. There's been so much flexibility in things, and there have been, and other things have been inflexible. So it's just like they're still giving homework, and there's still tests. The big question coming in 2021 is: are you going to see the assessments? Is that are there going to be the reading and math, 3 to 8 tests? That hasn't been decided yet, but I believe a lot of people will be watching that.
Definitely.
So we really don't know at this stage of the game whether or not we've effectively lost a year.
Right. We don't know. There have been some districts that have looked at assessments that they've done internally and have shown some slippage, and then there have been others that have shown none. So it depends.
Yeah.
We really don't know yet.
Okay. Well, we know that you'll be monitoring it, and we'll be following along with you and your colleagues at Newsday.
Yeah.
So
thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
No.
Hey,
if you find something, give us a knock. We'll always bring you on to tell us what you're getting into.
Of course. And just a reminder, listeners, again, obviously you can follow reporting in Newsday, online, and still in print. And I think you could follow some of your reporting, I know, on social media. I don't know how active you are, but if you have a preferred place, I know people can probably Google you and find it. But
I'm usually on Twitter at Joie Tyrrell, and it's 2 R's and 2 L's in the last name.
There you go.
Right, 2 R's and 2 L's. Right.
So, all right. Thank you so much again,
great.
Joie. You take care.
Thank you so much, Joie.
Holiday.
Most definitely the same to you and your family. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Talk again.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Take
Have
care.
a nice weekend.
Wow.
All right, Bill. Yeah, nice informative discussion.
Yeah,
and
very interesting.
No, most definitely. I know it's kind of, a topic that's been continuous. I know we've touched on it with a number of different reporters and elected, but it really is, core to everything in our local society. It starts with education, and, it starts with safety, and, how do you really weigh the two of those, kind of objectively? It seems like a really tough decision to make, let alone all the financial considerations,
Oh, God.
even if you had the blank check. But yeah, I'm glad to see that, relatively the concerns that we were afraid could be the worst case scenarios haven't, kind of actually come to pass. And, thankfully, there was even money apparently for them to do things like the school bus kind of safety camera. So it's good to see that not all is lost, and that, hopefully, like you said, it's not a completely lost year on multiple fronts. So, all right, going from what we were talking about there to another important issue that's been in the press and has some updates since we last spoke about it would be the property tax assessment breakdown. We know Scott Eidler had a new breakdown. So why don't we get into that?
This is interesting, and we've also heard from some other politicians about the assessment and that those numbers might be wrong and all that.
Oh yeah, there's definitely politics involved, and we know Legislator Ferretti had some strong comments last week, and we know Don Clavin, town of Hempstead supervisor, certainly is calling for the firing of the town assessor. So we'll break that down a little bit now.
But here, according to Scott Eidler, more than 214,000 Nassau homeowners are paying higher school taxes this year, compared with 115,000 who got reductions. That's a 65 to 35% split that reflects the most direct impact of County Executive Laura Curran's countywide property reassessment. Those who received tax increases included 104,568 property owners whose taxes rose by up to $500 compared with last year. Then 74,416 homeowners who got tax hikes of $500 to $1,000, and owners of 29,754 properties who saw tax increases of $1,000 to $2,000 this year, according to a county analysis provided to Newsday. Now, those who got decreases included 72,888 homeowners whose taxes dropped by up to $500, 20,893 who saw tax reductions of between $500 and $1,000, and then 12,148 property owners who got tax reductions of $1,000 to $2,000 this year, according to the data. So the county analysis represents the first complete review of the impact of the first reassessment in Nassau in a decade. First half school tax payments reflecting the new valuations were due to town tax receiver offices by last Thursday. School taxes comprised the largest portion of the property tax bill. So Laura Curran, a Democrat, campaigned against the broke assessment system when she ran for office in 2017 and ordered the reassessment of all county properties to be completed for the 2020-21 tax year. Administration officials said 11% of the total tax increases this year stemmed not from reassessment, but from budget decisions made by school districts.
Very interesting.
Interesting.
As we alluded to, and when we had the Legislator Ferretti on last week, where I knew, and again, obviously there was more to it than what met at the surface level of the story. And as we were finding out even anecdotally from our station director that, people are having their taxes raised regardless of the property tax freeze. My only thought was that by at least freezing the assessments, that at least that would be one way that additional taxes wouldn't go up. So I'm interested in hearing again, how exactly that was broken down there and why it's a little more complicated than you see.
I think that people have their eyes on their assessed number. That's the big issue, right? So I have a house. Yeah. They tell me it's $400,000. Mm-hmm. So, okay, if it stays $400,000 next year, does that mean my taxes are going to be the same? Those two things are not connected.
No, correct. But my thing is the correlation would be, though, if your property evaluation goes up, I would imagine that property taxes are more likely to raise than as if they stayed the same. So
that's a given. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. That's the only thing where I can see, and I know I believe Mangano had done the same when he was in office, and it's something. But it's something that, has been done before, and it makes sense in theory, but it also is something I think that sounds good politically, but may, like you said, when you pick it apart, be a little...
it's fancy footwork. It's fancy footwork.
And
it's the same thing as checking your credit score. I've got a great credit score. Yeah, okay, great. But that doesn't mean you can borrow money.
Yeah, exactly.
It really doesn't mean anything, depending on what the rest of your financial situation looks like.
Yeah,
we can have a party about one number, but it's not going to change the reality.
No, correct. And we'll follow up more on that. And like I said, we want to make sure that people understand that their taxes, as was just mentioned there, may be increased regardless of what they're hearing in the press. But it is a case-by-case situation, and we will continue to monitor the reporting that comes out on that. Let's go quickly. We have also an update specifically about another complex number story, which is the budget. The budget passing, it looks like yesterday. That was broken last night. Another story also by Scott Eidler. It's there a little bit down. Do you see that one, Bill?
This is the Nassau County Police Department?
No, it's right underneath there, I believe, right?
Because that's another one. Property tax assessment? Oh, that's the one I did.
Yeah. Okay, just go with the NCPD one. That's fine.
Yeah, because I think that we want to mention that before we go off the air. Is that
true?
This is Scott Eidler, too, Michael O'Keefe, and Lane Filler. Mm-hmm. The Nassau County activists who sued to stop a new county contract with its Superior Officers Association from going into effect got closer to their goal yesterday when a New York State Supreme Court judge issued a temporary restraining order. The county must now respond to the suit by December 24th. The suit names as defendants Curran, a Democrat, and 16 of 19 county legislators who voted to approve the contract, including 11 Republicans and 5 Democrats. Also named are Barsky, NIFA board members, and Nassau's clerk of the legislature, Michael Pulitzer. The 8.5-year deal, approved by the county legislature last month on an emergency basis, forestalled both committee scrutiny and a public comment period. It provides 15% raises over the life of the deal, a $3,000 annual stipend in exchange for adopting body cameras, and $8,000 salary increase for those who have been supervisors for more than 6 years. A Nassau judge issued a temporary restraining order Thursday barring implementation of a police labor agreement approved by the county legislature last month in response to a lawsuit that said lawmakers wrongly voted for the contract on an emergency basis. The local activist's attorney, Frederick Brewington, argued in the filing that the situation does not meet the legal definition of an emergency that would allow skipping steps, and that Chief Deputy County Executive Helena Williams did not have the right to sign the letter and setting out the emergency.
Yep. And that all comes in the wake of this summer's police reform, police accountability kind of social movement that kind of rose up out of the, killing police, killing in custody of George Floyd back during the summer, and the governor and the state putting in additional kind of protocols to make sure that at least reforms were considered in the process. So I know that the SOA, the contract, again, for the specifically not just the NCPD overall, but the officers, branch of the department, was approved by the legislature by that 16-3 vote, and was on the agenda for, last night's Nassau Interim Finance Authority, NIFA. Yeah. So it's something that it's interesting to see that it has had enough merit to be now forestalled by the courts, and for them to have to go back and review a contract that seems like it was done, because it had passed, it had been approved, like we just said, but it looks like there's more there that at least needs to be vetted before, that agreement can be met. And apparently that organization hasn't had a contract since 2017, so it's definitely going to be something that we'll see what happens over the next little while. Yeah. And I'll just allude to, we won't have much time for it right now. We'll get into it when we get back in the new year about what the actual breakdown of it is. But I can just say that as of last night, NIFA, they did agree, the directors, to approve the budget for Nassau County in a 4-1 vote. One member did dissent, but again, the Nassau County budget, authored by Laura Curran, for $3.3 billion will be passed for 2021. But it will also develop require the county to develop a plan for dealing with the deficits projected to balloon over the next 4 years of upwards of $359.7 million potentially by 2024. So we'll follow up on that, and we'll have time to get into it, because that is not going anywhere, because the money is the end all be all when it comes to pretty much everything we talk about as usual, Bill. Well, and this is our last show of 2020. Yeah, it seems that way. It's been a crazy year. We had a lot of time off, kind of not on the air, but we're happy to be back. We're happy to obviously, have the platform to have, you, Bill, have your thoughts, and to have, us be able to interview folks on these topics. And, we're grateful. I know.
Yeah, definitely.
that we're happy to see where we are and where we can go. I think in the next year, I think there's a lot of good potential. So let's just keep working together. Let's keep building and keeping an eye on these issues that impact Long Islanders.
There's so many. It's really wild, isn't it? When you,
of course, yeah. No,
you start to look around, just the landscape of things that need attention for starters.
Yeah, and that's why I think at some point we'll have a story. I mean, a show where we can go into what to watch in 2020 and maybe a recap of the 2021 rather, and the recap of 2020's COVID news. But we should also do another separate maybe show or a bit about all the non-COVID news that was important that happened this year that people might have missed out on. So keep a lookout for that. Reminder to follow us on social media at TWLI News on Twitter, on now Instagram, on Facebook. Just do a Google search, This Week's Long Island News, and find us. You can follow Bill McIntyre as well. And just thank you. We look forward to doing bigger and better things and trying to get more involvement in the kind of environment that we're in here remotely. Hopefully, with more public participation and getting more guests that you guys want to hear. Just talk about these issues on the record with their information. So
and we're a week away from. So next Friday would be Christmas Eve, or next Friday would be Christmas.
Oh yeah,
and Thursday night is Christmas Eve, right? We here at This Week's Long Island News hope everyone has a very safe and happy holiday. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. Hanukkah's almost over, no? Or are we?
I think we're right around the 8th day.
I think we got to,
get it wrong, but
and then of course there's Festivus for the rest of us.
Whatever you partake in, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah.
We're just hoping for a safe one, and we'll all meet you back on the other side, in 2021, where we'll all be hoping and wishing for maybe a less eventful year. I don't know how to put that, but you know what I mean.
I'd like to go back to the normal of just, like you said, talking about obscure environmental policies that affect just Long Islanders and other little minor things of, constituent concerns. So hopefully one day we'll get back to the boring stuff. But I know we'll be focused on all the big items, really for everyone's, benefit, including ours, because
So
a lot of stuff
from our family here at This Week's Long Island News, we wish you all a very safe and happy holiday, and we'll see you again in the new year. John, I hope you get the pony.
And not the unicorn, at least the pony. Same thing for you.
At least the pony.
A new set of drums, maybe.
Yeah, right. But anyway, have a good, happy, healthy, and we'll see you on the other side. This is Bill McIntyre and John Gallo, and you're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College.